When thinking about the future, it is fashionable to be pessimistic. Time magazine's cover on October 31st, 2021 represents the doomsday narrative, and it feeds an alarmist approach to global warming that has become increasingly popular over the last few years. Almost virtuous, with the likes of people like Greta Thunberg and her angry, anxious and desperate speeches. The Times article says the last call for climate, the world's leaders need to stop talking and start acting. The Times get it wrong a lot, and they and many other mainstream corporate legacy media have also. Here is just a brief history from the 1960s of climate alarmism and catastrophizing amidst the media, scientists and experts. New York Times in 1969 said, "Unless we are extremely lucky, everyone will disappear in a cloud of blue steam by 1989. Los Angeles Times in 1967, "Already too late, dire famine forecast by 1975. The Boston Globe, April 16, 1970, said air pollution may obliterate the sun and cause a new ice age by 2030. October 6, 1970, the Redlands in California, Daily Facts, quoted Dr. Paul Ehrlich, the famous population alarmist, predicting that the oceans will be as dead as Lake Erie in less than a decade. And America will be subject to water rationing by 1974 and food rationing by 1980. The Washington Post in 1971, "In the next 50 years, the fine dust man constantly puts in the atmosphere by fossil fuel burning could screen out so much sunlight that the average temperature could drop by 6 degrees. If sustained over several years, 5 to 10. Such a temperature decrease could be sufficient to trigger an ice age." In 1974, the UPI reported the Earth's ozone layer was disappearing and causing a great peril to life. But actually, by 2001, the ozone hole layer grew to its greatest coverage in generations. Time magazine, yet again, another ice age, Monday, June 24, 1974. The acid rain scare in the 1980s also proved to be exaggerated and alarmist. The Noblesville Ledger predicted in 1980 that acid rain would kill all life in lakes. 10 years later, a US government program that studied acid rain found that acid rain wasn't an environmental crisis at all. In 1978, the 30-year cooling trend in the Northern Hemisphere was considered a serious problem, and the New York Times claimed that there was no end in sight to it. And it was just 9 years later, in 1988, that the Lansing State Journal in Michigan warned Washington, D.C. to prepare for long, hot summers. The Miami News in 1988, "More droughts likely," expert tells senator. And then there's the apocalypse of rising sea levels. In the Canberra Times in 1988, "A gradual rise in average sea level is threatening to completely cover the Indian Ocean nation and 1,196 small islands within the next 30 years. UN officials in 1989 predicted entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if the global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000. James Hansen told Salon on October 23, 2001 that New York's West Side Highway, which runs along the Hudson River, would be underwater by 2019. The Independent in UK in 2000 quoted Dr. David Viner, a senior research scientist at the Climatic Research Centre unit, as saying that within a few years, winter snowfall will become a very rare and exciting event. He claimed children just aren't going to know what snow is. The Guardian, February 21st, 2004, climate change over the next 20 years could result in a global catastrophe costing millions of lives in wars and natural disasters. CBS News, June 24th, 2008, NASA scientist says we are toast. The Independent in 2009, British PM says we have fewer than 50 days to save our planet from catastrophe. In The Independent on July 9th, 2009, Prince Charles, capitalism and consumerism have brought the world to the brink of collapse. We have just 96 months to save the world. The Guardian, July 24th, 2013, ice-free Arctic in 2 years. Methane catastrophe could destabilise the climate system. In Australia, Tim Flannery, the global warming apologist who said that the dams would never fill again in 2007, was proven very wrong, and it was proven to actually be the opposite of what happened in 2020, where many dams such as the Warragamba Dam were filled to beyond capacity again. And we have to mention Al Gore, notorious for being a failed prophet of environmental alarmism. Most of his predictions are great examples of his catastrophic downfalls when it comes to predicting the environment's future. Anything from his prediction that sea levels could rise as much as 20 feet, or Mount Kilimanjaro was losing its snow cap due to global warming. Or my favourite one, a year after his movie, he was claiming that the polar bear's habitat is melting and they are literally being forced off the planet. Today it appears there are actually 4 times as many polar bears as there were in the 1960s, so quite the opposite to being forced off the planet. So why the alarmism? Environmentalism gives people purpose. What greater meaning is there than solving an existential threat? As Jenna Prager notes, what could possibly give people more meaning to their lives than the idea of saving the planet? Another point is to look at who is making money from greener investments. Many theorise that environmentalism is very much relabelling the new communist agenda. It blames capitalism and powerful corporations for a dying world and advocates for limiting their profit for the good of the common people. This collectivist, anti-capitalist, and more need for tighter government control are all aspects rooted in a Marxist ideology. Also interesting that many environmentalists, activists, and elites who fuel the rhetoric around global warming have been proven to be sympathetic to socialism.